In the world of American megachurches, few platforms are as influential as the Potter's House in Dallas, Texas. Under the iconic leadership of Bishop T.D. Jakes, the church has grown from a local congregation into a global movement, impacting millions with messages of hope, healing, purpose, and spiritual transformation. But in recent months, an unexpected shift has sent ripples throughout the church community. Pastor Joel Tudman, one of the rising stars within the Potter's House, quietly and suddenly exited the ministry without a formal public explanation. The shock of his departure wasn't just about one man stepping down. It raised questions that echo throughout the landscape of modern ministry. What happened behind the scenes? Was this a quiet transition or a deeper leadership struggle? Why did Bishop T.D. Jakes wait so long to speak? And what does this moment reveal about the inner workings of spiritual legacy and leadership succession? Let's unravel the layers of this story, because what has unfolded goes far beyond a pastor changing pulpits. It's a lesson on power, timing, transition, and the sensitive balance between loyalty and calling in today's spiritual climate. The voice that captivated a generation. To understand the weight of this moment, we must first examine who Pastor Joel Tudman is and why his role at the Potter's House was so pivotal. Unlike many associate pastors who operate quietly behind the scenes, Tudman was a visible and magnetic force on the pulpit. His preaching style, raw, real, passionate, captivated not only members of the church, but online audiences across generations. Tudman was more than a preacher. He was a connector. He had an uncanny ability to translate timeless biblical truths into language that resonated with millennials, Gen Z, and those burned out or skeptical of traditional religious spaces. He spoke directly to modern struggles, anxiety, identity, purpose, trauma, while anchoring his message in Scripture. For many, Tudman became a spiritual lifeline, especially for those who felt unseen in the grandeur of megachurch life. Before his tenure at the Potter's House, Tudman had already developed a platform as a motivational speaker and mentor. He had a background in athletics, leadership development, and pastoral ministry, giving him a blend of edge and experience that made him both relatable and commanding. His rise within Bishop Jakes' ministry was seen not as an accident, but a strategic alignment. Many saw Tudman as a spiritual son, possibly even a successor, someone uniquely positioned to carry the vision of the Potter's House into the next era. The silence that sparked speculation. But then, something shifted. Over time, observant members and online followers noticed Tudman's absence. He no longer appeared at key services. His name was missing from promotional materials. His voice, once a staple in the rhythm of Potter's House worship, grew strangely silent. Social media, which had once showcased his sermons and ministry updates, began reflecting more personal branding, less connection to the church. Still, no public statement came, no farewell sermon, no announcement from the pulpit. For a ministry that had publicly celebrated other transitions, this absence was glaring. And in the absence of clarity, speculation grew. Whispers turned into debates. Members asked privately, did he leave? Was he pushed out? Was this about power, conflict, or calling? Some feared scandal. Others assumed it was a quiet, strategic move. Everyone wanted answers. And for weeks, then months, Bishop T.D. Jakes remained silent. His silence, intended or not, became a statement. In the world of ministry, where image, influence, and clarity are critical, such quietness can stir both confusion and concern. Congregants, fans, and critics alike watched with increasing curiosity. Why hadn't this transition been addressed? Was something being protected, or was something being prepared? In the moment Bishop Jakes finally spoke, eventually the moment arrived. Bishop Jakes, known for his wisdom and spiritual discernment, broke his silence, not in a dramatic tell-all, but in a tone marked by grace, wisdom, and strategic distance. When he finally addressed the matter, it wasn't to feed gossip or rumours, it was to refocus the narrative. He began by honouring Joel Tudman's contributions. There was no denial of his value or impact. Jakes acknowledged the anointing on Tudman's life, the value of his voice, and the meaningful role he played in the life of the church. This alone was significant. It wasn't a dismissal, it was a release. But perhaps more important than what he said was how he said it. Bishop Jakes framed Tudman's departure not as a controversy, but as a transition, a change in assignment. He emphasized that in ministry, seasons change. People move on, not because something went wrong, but because God is calling them into something different. The message was clear. This was not a scandal. It was a shift. His words were both protective and freeing. Protective of the institution, of Tudman, and of the broader church community. But they also freed listeners from the temptation to vilify or idolize. Jakes wasn't dragging anyone. He wasn't defending against accusations. He was pastoring his people through uncertainty, modeling how to let go with honor. Through the real story, legacy, leadership, and the tension of transition. While Bishop T.D. Jakes' carefully crafted response to Pastor Joel Tudman's departure brought clarity and calm to a wave of speculation, it didn't fully silence the deeper questions it raised. Because this wasn't just about one man stepping away from the pulpit. This was about the deeper, more complex dynamics of legacy, leadership, and the tension of transition in the modern church. It was about what happens when ministries evolve faster than their structures can keep up. When emerging leaders rise with a momentum that even the best succession plans can't always contain. The Potter's House has long stood as one of the most influential churches in America, and much of that has been because of Bishop Jakes' leadership. But with influence comes the inevitable challenge of legacy. For years, Jakes has spoken about raising up the next generation, preparing others to carry the torch when his time on the front lines begins to shift. That's a noble goal, and a necessary one. But as any seasoned leader knows, transitions are rarely smooth or simple. There's always more at play: timing, ego, emotion, loyalty, and the ever-present question of calling. Pastor Tudman's meteoric rise within the church coincided with a season where the Potter's House itself was changing, demographically, culturally, and spiritually. His voice resonated with younger believers, his style drew in crowds both online and in person, and his authenticity made him a standout. For many, he felt like a natural extension of Jakes' legacy, perhaps even a potential successor. But here's the hard truth: callings don't always align with organizational expectations. God's plan for a leader's life doesn't always fit neatly within church schedules, titles, or platforms. Sometimes the next chapter requires stepping away, not out of rebellion, but out of obedience. And that's what makes Tudman's departure not just a church story, but a deeply personal spiritual one. This moment forces the church to confront a difficult but necessary reality. Releasing leaders is as important as raising them. Spiritual fathers, no matter how anointed, must come to a point where they let go, where they bless the departure rather than resist it. Churches, especially those with strong brand identities, must learn how to celebrate a leader's exit without framing it as loss. And believers must grow in spiritual maturity, learning to distinguish between God's will and personal comfort. Why this moment matters for the church at large. The broader implications of Tudman's exit and Jakes' response reach far beyond Dallas. In an age where church scandals often involve cover-ups, ego wars, and public breakdowns, this moment is different. It's a reminder that not every exit is toxic. Some are just part of the journey. Some aren't betrayals. They're assignments. Jakes' handling of the matter, while not overly detailed, sets a standard of spiritual maturity. He didn't feed speculation. He didn't shade anyone. He taught, he affirmed, and he moved on. In doing so, he demonstrated that real leadership isn't just about holding on to people, it's about letting them go when their purpose demands it. For churches navigating generational change, Tudman's story raises important questions. How do we prepare rising leaders for independence? How do we recognize when someone's season has shifted, even if they're still successful where they are? Can we let people leave without labeling them rebellious? Can legacy thrive even when successors go their own way? What's next for Pastor Joel Tudman? As for Tudman, his next chapter is just beginning, and though he may no longer stand under the Potter's House banner, his voice isn't silenced, it's being redirected. There's strong speculation that he may plant a church, establishing a new ministry that reflects his own vision, tone, and calling. With a loyal base of followers and the spiritual credibility earned through years of faithful service, Tudman is positioned to launch something powerful. Alternatively, he could expand into digital media, coaching, authorship, and public speaking. In today's era, pastors aren't limited to pulpits. Tudman could impact millions through books, workshops, podcasts, and online teachings, especially now that he's free to shape his own narrative. Whatever path he chooses, one thing is clear: this isn't the end, it's a beginning. You're the takeaway: a church in transition, a kingdom on the move, expanded to 500 words. In the end, this story between Pastor Joel Tudman and Bishop T.D. Jakes is not one rooted in disappointment, scandal, or division, but rather in divine direction. It marks a powerful moment of transition, not just for two individuals, but for a larger spiritual movement that is constantly evolving. The church, particularly in the context of megachurches like the Potter's House, is undergoing a generational and structural shift. The departure of Pastor Tudman is symbolic of that change, not a fracture, but a fulfillment of a greater calling. God is raising new voices, not to compete with established leaders, but to complement and expand the work of the kingdom in ways that meet the current culture where it is. Each generation has its messengers, voices tailored to speak to the specific struggles, questions, and needs of the time. Pastor Joel Tudman, with his dynamic preaching and authentic connection to younger audiences, represents that fresh voice. His departure may feel sudden to some, but in the larger narrative of spiritual growth, it reflects the truth that purpose doesn't always remain in one place. This moment is a passing of the torch, not in a dramatic or confrontational way, but in the quiet, intentional release of one leader stepping aside to let another rise. Bishop T.D. Jakes, whose ministry has touched millions globally, has long preached the importance of stepping into your destiny. Now, by publicly honouring Tudman's journey and affirming his next steps, Jakes models what it looks like to release, rather than resist, the natural flow of calling and transition. For those watching, the key takeaway is this: ministries must adapt, leaders must grow, and transitions are not betrayals. They are part of the divine rhythm of leadership. Tudman leaving the Potter's House does not diminish his value, nor does it diminish the legacy of Jakes. Instead, it affirms that spiritual fathers raise spiritual sons not to hold them forever, but to equip and launch them into their own God-ordained paths. And so, Pastor Joel Tudman steps forward, not into obscurity, but into opportunity. His next chapter, whether it involves planting a church, becoming a global influencer, or mentoring the next generation, will build on the foundation he helped shape under Bishop Jakes' covering. In a world often addicted to drama, this story reminds us that transition can be healthy, necessary, and even holy. The church is not about maintaining sameness, it's about responding to the Spirit's leading in every season. This isn't just a leadership shift, it's a kingdom movement. And both Bishop Jakes and Pastor Tudman are showing us how to walk through it, with grace, with purpose, and with eyes fixed firmly on the future.